Entities are central to Hammer and designing levels, and there are many different types of entities. Let's take a quick look at the entity overview that we'll use when we're designing levels in Counter-Strike and Half-Life 2. Entities can be divided up into these main types. We have brush entities, point entities, and nodes. Within point entities, there are actual multiple types of entities, including your prop entities, logic entities, and NPC entities. Brush entities consist of brush geometry, which we've covered already, but can be grouped or tied to an entity and given functionality beyond that of normal geometry. Brush entities are constructed from brushes, but the volume of that brush actually relates to how it will act within the level, and they can be used for various tasks. Prop entities are the entities that we will use the most when designing a level within Hammer. Prop entities can be further divided into detail props, static props, physics props, dynamic props, and ragdoll props. Detail props are the simplest and easiest for the engine to render. Detail props can number in the tens of thousands and typically are not placed by level designers as you go through. They can be automatically generated from materials or placed as either models or sprites. Static props are props that do not move, don't have any real physics other than you simply being able to run into them, and cannot break. So you can shoot them, you can run into them, but they're not going to break into pieces. Static props will cast shadows, but they're not dynamic shadows. Physics props are props with built-in physical systems. They can be tied to other objects, constrained, hooked on, pushed around. You can pick them up, you can use them, you can throw them, and you can break them apart. They also cast dynamic shadows and are a bit more expensive to render. Dynamic props are models that can be placed in a hierarchy, have joints, they can have animations that you can trigger, and have other functionality which we'll get into later. Ragdoll props are the most expensive for the engine to render, and for the most part act exactly like dynamic props, but they have their own individual skeletal system so they can unfold, move, fall off things, deform, in many varying ways. Logic entities are invisible entities that we'll use to add advanced functionality to our map. You can count the number of times something happens. You can help enemies know how to better kill you. Lights are also considered logic entities and are rendered when we compile our map, adding light and shading to the rest of our level. NPC entities are your non-player characters, enemies, allies, generic actors, all characters other than yourself which you can interact with or run around to play the game. Node entities are placed like point entities in a network to help NPC characters navigate more successfully. Physics simulations in the Source engine can be very powerful. So let's go back into Hammer and take a look at how we can use many of these entities.